Welcome back to Turning Hard Times to Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really happy to have Gene Epstein with me again, who really needs no introduction because Gene is with us frequently, at least once a month. He is the moderator of a wonderful event that takes place the first Thursday of every month at the General Society Library at 20 West 44th Street, and that's the New York City Junto meetings. That's located between 5th and 6th Avenues, and I would really urge any and all of you who are within driving distance of New York City, a subway distance, come on down and see and listen and take advantage of this free show. It doesn't cost a penny to get in, and you are free to ask questions of the guest speaker. And our guest speaker this coming Thursday is none other than Gene Epstein himself. So really pleased to have you, Gene. Thanks for joining me again. And what are you going to talk about this Thursday?
Well, you might think that there's nothing further to say about Thomas Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century, the book about inequality, the book that basically nobody has read based on research that was cited from Amazon's Kindle, that nobody got past to page 26. My point is going to be, in part, that book has a lot in common in that regard, among other most unread books, like John Maynard Keynes' General Theory, and like Karl Marx's book Capital, and that when such books go almost completely unread, they become all the more dangerous because nobody opens them and finds out, oh my God, what kind of mess is this? They just read the commentary, and the commentary has, of course, been forthcoming from three Nobel Prize winners. I'm going to point out Robert Solow, Paul Krugman, and Joseph Stiglitz, who actually, in each case, have a very different version of what the book says, but people listening to them and not reading the book. So I'm going to talk about the phenomenon of the Piketty book. I'm also going to work from a very good work by another Nobel Prize winner whom I have more respect for. That's Friedrich Hayek. I think one of his best books is a short one called The Mirage of Social Justice, in which I think he really has written the definitive discussion of the mirage of equality in a market system. But again, the mirage of equality is indeed something that all people seem to have some craving for. It goes back to one of the seven deadly sins, that is the sin of envy. It goes back to the 10th commandment, the one that would have us not covet our neighbor's house.
Right.
So those things run deep in humanity, and I think that's the reason why this totally messy book resonates. I'm also going to point out something that is little understood, that to my amazement, in his longest review of the Piketty books, it was Paul Krugman who got it right, who admits that Piketty commits a sleight of hand. I'm not going to go into it. The sleight of hand is actually that Piketty himself realizes that his capital versus growth model, which has been so touted about as his key insight into capitalism, actually doesn't apply to his main bête noire, the U.S. economy. He does a sleight of hand in that he actually repudiates his own model when it comes to the U.S. economy, and he goes after the usual, which is CEO salaries. It's really just old wine and new bottles about how high those CEO salaries are, and that while it's been argued that Piketty has this key insight into capital growth versus wage growth, that really he himself realizes how ludicrous that is to apply to the U.S. economy, or indeed to any economy, and for that reason he does a bait and switch. I'm going to point that out, and then point out that, to my amazement, Krugman realized that and does accuse Piketty of a kind of sleight of hand. But being a fundamentally dishonest writer, Krugman has actually contradicted himself in so much else that he's written about the Piketty book. So it's a fascinating phenomenon, but I'm trying to argue that free market people have got to understand that the sin of envy, the deadly sin of envy, and the 10th commandment are around for a reason, because they're there to correct a certain tendency in human nature to be envious and to covet our neighbors' houses.
Yeah, and to covet and then steal, which is really what we get the government to help us do in a socialist society, right? And help us rob.
That was a Nobel lecture. I'm forgetting the guy's name, but he said really the two Ten Commandments about economics are thou shalt not covet and thou shalt not steal.
Right, but that's what governments do. Governments covet. They get votes from those of us who covet, and then they, through the barrel of a gun, take from those that have. It's just the lack of respect for private property. Gene, you said this guy Krugman. I was just thinking, as you said, the sleight of hand. It takes one to know one, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. No.
It takes one con artist to really identify another one, perhaps.
Well, that's an excellent point, and it's amazing that even in this particular case, Krugman wrote a piece called "The Piketty Panic," in which he attributes to Piketty totally different ideas. Really, it's that when you give these guys the gun of envy and the mantra of inequality, they'll just say anything. So indeed, he's. I reflect that if I actually were a sort of social democrat like Krugman, I'd be embarrassed to be his intellectual ally because he is so fundamentally dishonest in what he writes. I've encountered a few people who certainly agree with him more than I do, economists who agree with him more than I do, who are indeed embarrassed about him.
We've got, my engineer says 2 minutes. I wanted you to comment real quickly while we're talking about Krugman. Yeah. You wrote an article on the 28th of July for Barron's called "How Krugman Fudged the Truth on the Debt, on the U.S. Debt." Yeah. Can you talk? Give us, you have 30, you have a minute.
Quickly, readers asked me about that. I reluctantly had to write about it. They were incredulous that I could write an earlier column the week before that the debt is a big problem according to the Congressional Budget Office. Krugman, almost the same day, wrote a column, unbeknownst to me, that came out that according to the Congressional Budget Office, the debt is not a problem at all. And so readers said, how can you and Krugman completely read the same study and come to totally different conclusions? And I said it was simply because Krugman didn't read the study. All he did was take one set of numbers and completely suppress the other set of numbers. I actually think in that case it was just sheer laziness on his part that he didn't read past the first couple of pages. Of course, that's thoroughly irresponsible if you're going to be a columnist, and then to quote the SIBO. But that's really all it amounted to.
A big time columnist, one that's revered for whatever reasons. It's incredible, but we are basically out of time. I think what it would suggest to people, if you pick up a copy of Barron's, read Gene's articles almost every week. He writes the Economic Beat. He also is involved with the review of a lot of really great books and not such great books, and he provides a critique of those, or he has other people that does. So Gene does an excellent job of Barron's. Pick up your copy of Barron's and read Gene Epstein's insights every week. So I want to thank you very much, Gene. And
people at 20 West 44th Street, that's in Midtown Manhattan. And
that's right.
Avenue, of course.
That's right. And 7:30 to 8 o'clock is when the show really begins. And Gene Epstein himself is the keynote speaker this week, this month. That's this coming Thursday at the library. Thank you very much, Gene, for being with us once again. Look forward to seeing you on Thursday.
Great, my pleasure.